Welcome everybody to the Learn with Bruce and Eddie podcast. My name is Bruce. I am a transformation coach and I help people make breakthroughs in their health and fitness so that they can thrive. I'm joined here by Eddie.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Eddie, you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, similar to Bruce, I help people transform to get better through movement, through feeling and thinking better. And yeah, I'm here to help people improve their lives.
And you've certainly done that for me, mate. I was a client of Eddie's for a period of time. And today we're going to talk about mindset, which Eddie's actually helped me a lot with my mindset, with certain tools. So just as like a brief intro into like what you can expect from this podcast in case you're new, you know, we're going to try and basically just like break down topics in about 30 minutes. We've had mixed success with that. Some have gone on to like 40 minutes. But anyway, we're going to try and condense basically what we've learned through just our experiences. So we're not saying that we're necessarily like authorities on these topics, but we do feel like we've got quite a lot of experience and we do help clients with this. So we're interested, we're engaged, you know, we read, we learn. So we're here to try and share some of that wisdom with you. And this episode, we're going to try and tackle mindset, which, you know, we kind of, as we sat down to record this, we thought, wow, this could be like a really big one. So, you know, apologies if there's some stuff that we missed, but we're just going to try and, look at what our understanding of mindset is. So, Eddie, why don't we start with like, you know, how do you see your mindset being different today versus maybe like in the past? What shifts have you experienced?
Oh man, massive shifts. So, you know, growing up and in my adolescence, early teens, I had quite a self-sabotaging, bleak outlook. I would see the negatives quite often. I would see the failures. I wouldn't believe in myself. I wouldn't believe things were possible. I would be jealous of people who were happy or who were being successful. So I would say I had quite a negative mindset that I would escape from through drinking, drugs, and chasing dopamine to feel good for a minute.
What do you think was like driving stuff, underlying that stuff? Do you have like any?
But some of it's environmental and things I was exposed to as a child. Music, films, situations I was exposed to and saw. I grew up in quite a rough area, lots of misguided masculinity, not enough role models, no one really showing me what to do. As you know, as I grew up and became a man, no one really showed me what that meant or how to do it. So yeah, my outlook was quite bleak, I guess.
Do you think fear played a role?
Massively.
Yeah.
Massively.
Because I can really relate to everything you're saying, and I think, yeah, for me, I was scared of like what my identity was. You know, I wanted to kind of prove myself. It was all driven by fear, but of course I had no idea at the time.
Yeah, and same. So I can only see this looking back. In the time, I was just in it. But yeah, I cared a lot about what other people thought. So I would act in a certain way to be received in a certain way, and so I wasn't being authentic. So I was, you know, scared of showing my true self. And then through various things that happened in my life, I began to gain some awareness of that. Yoga was one of the things that helped me.
We talked about that on episode 4, so if you want to go back and
So yeah, that helped massively, just starting to gain awareness and be like, actually, hold on, could I have more control here? You know, am I this victim? Are all these things happening to me, or am I just perceiving it in a certain way? And that began my interest in perception and observing situations, which again ties back into yoga, because yoga is all about observing situations instead of reacting to situations. And that was the biggest thing. And when I realized I had autonomy over how I see things, then I could start to change the perspective into a more positive perspective. And that was the launch pad. And when I started doing that, that starts to compound day by day, week by week, until you start to really believe in yourself, until you start responding to life instead of reacting to life. And then you realize you have the power. And once you got the power back, then it's like, wow, okay, how far can I push this now?
So what you're talking about there is almost like a mindset that is, you're almost in like autopilot. You're kind of like just reacting to stuff, and like your natural thing is, oh, I can't do that, or this is the way I do this. And then you start to pause and you start to create a bit of space between the thing, whatever the stimulus is that then makes the behavior. And then you learn new patterns of behavior almost. Well, that's what I'm kind of thinking as I listen to you.
100%, and that's what it dives down to. Basically, there's a lot of things we can't change, right? We can't change a lot of situations that happen to us due to our environments and where we are in the world and whatnot. There's so much stuff we can't control. So let that shit go, right? But what we can control is how we respond. But most of us, especially me, was in a reactive state. I was constantly reacting because I felt like things were happening to me, right? You know, you can even use the analogy of like road rage. When someone cuts you up, in your head they've cut you up, but you don't know what's happening for that person, and they actually probably haven't even seen you or even thinking of you, and they're not having a personal attack on you on the road, but we receive it like that because we're reacting. Someone's done this to me, or life has done this to me, or it's my parents' fault.
It's funny that, isn't it? I read that basically, like, we see a car, then it's the car we're in is like an extension of ourselves.
Yeah.
So it almost becomes like that. With that, we're the organism, but you're not your fucking car, are you?
Not at all.
But I'm fascinated by that because I think I've learned to try and really let go of a lot of anger issues, and the one thing I can't let go of is road rage. Because when it happens, somebody beeps or something, the sense of sort of injustice and the sense that like I've just got it's like this knee-jerk reaction where I respond with anger, like, fuck you, what do you mean it's not my fucking fault? And then always after, I just feel so shitty about myself.
Well, because you've allowed someone to take you out of your peace.
Yeah.
Or something. It doesn't have to be someone, because it could be a situation in life. But, that feeling comes from the lack of autonomy and someone pulling you away from your centre and causing you to act causing you to react in a certain way. But when you start to get to grips with that and you start to, it takes a bit of work, and I'm no expert in this. There's still some things in life that absolutely throw me, but I continue to work on it. It's learning to come from a place of responding. Okay, this is happening. How do I respond to this? Instead of having this knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah. So how do you think people listening to this can teach themselves to kind of like, observe and pause? Like, is there anything that you think has helped you, or any practices that like you would suggest to someone if they're going through something like that?
One thing is that I believe that most of us are highly overstimulated, right? So we're highly stimulated from life, from things happening to us, from sounds, from you talked about this before, but like artificial light, all these things that we don't even know are stressing us. Then we have the actual stresses of like partners and kids and work and money. So we're all walking around in this heightened state. So when anything happens, we just lose our shit. So one thing that helped me gain awareness was starting to create space in my life by doing things like working out, by getting into nature, by breathing, by eating right, by reducing the impact of all of these external stresses on me. The ones that I could control, I started to control, which gave me more space, took me out of a heightened state. And then I was able to respond and not react. And it started to just kind of happen intuitively. But as I noticed it, I was like, wow, I can put some energy into this.
It's so hard to do that, isn't it? We talked about yoga on a previous episode, and I don't want to make us out to be like these two sort of like, hippie like gurus that just want to go on about yoga all the time. But like yoga has been one of our tools that's helped us. There's this form of yin yoga, which, I mentioned. Yin is kind of this, restful, restorative. It's kind of the dark, where things rest. And then there's yang, which is like the light, where things are really busy, things grow, and that's the kind of doing. And we live in a world which is very yang. And so it's so incredibly hard. I find it incredibly hard to pull myself in, like going for a walk for 3 hours. I'll think about doing that, and I'll be like, I feel guilty.
Can't do it.
I feel guilty if I go for 3 hours into the stamina park. Why do I feel guilty? And it's because, I'm programmed to be doing stuff. And that's the thing that I guess I've been taught, I've learned, is the thing that validates me, or like somehow, I need to be doing to keep up with the fucking Joneses, whoever the Joneses are. Screw the Joneses.
Fuck the Joneses.
So cool. So bringing. I mean, we are, but bring it back to mindset. I think, what you're talking about is, really interesting, because you're alluding to how your mindset is really going to dictate like behaviors. So, and I think that's why mindset is so important. One of the things that I was going to mention about a tool, which has really helped me to create this space, this pause, like going into nature, yoga, all those things, definitely exercise really helped me just to kind of, just be doing something that isn't work or doing or whatever it is that's paying the bills. But it's also writing. So I spent nearly 3 years in recovery for addiction to cocaine, doing a 12-step program. And they get you to do heaps of writing, which, I don't mean to make that sound like it was like a chore. It was just, it was actually a joy. I mean, not always, but the amount of writing you do is significant, and it's helpful. Taking inventory at the end of every day. I was doing this practice for quite some time, and you were looking back on your day, and you were just seeing certain situations and how you'd responded, and you would write down. Yes, why I sort of wondered if fear played a role for you, because it definitely played a role for me. In the big book of like Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about fear being the firing mechanism for all sin, and I find that to be really true, because and we can talk about that, how it pertains in terms of like mindset, but because I was just basically a scared boy, I would respond. The road rage incident is a good example. In that moment, I was so scared of being in the wrong or being perceived as a cunt. Excuse my language. I would respond with a defensive outburst of "fuck you," because I'm scared. I don't want to be perceived as the fucker in that instance. I perceive myself to be right, and I think writing about that. I mean, as you can tell me talking about it, I have quite good clarity over that now. And it's because I would write stuff out and I would see, oh my God, this is actually what's at play here. Yeah. If you can hear the seagulls, by the way, we're in Brighton, so the menaces are everywhere. But so, yeah, I think writing has been a really important tool to just bring awareness onto this stuff that goes on for me. And we've talked about this in previous episodes. If you don't have awareness around something, it just lives in the dark.
Yeah, it's going to control you as well.
And it's going to control you. So, for me, having awareness over it is shining light on something and then being aware of it so you can take action, or you cannot take, a reactionary response. You cannot react to something. You mentioned, being like the observer. It really has helped me to be the observer of how I am. So, are there any other like areas of your mindset that you would say have kind of like shifted, or any areas of your mindset that you've struggled with in the past?
So a lot of my issues around mindset feeds into behavior. So mindset feeds behaviors, behaviors feed mindset. And if you're struggling to change the mindset, then focus on the behavior. If you're struggling to change the behavior, focus on the mindset. They're sort of interchangeable. And I noticed that when I changed I couldn't even work on my mind. I tried, it wasn't working. So I dialed it back and I was like, okay, so what behaviors could I start to change in my life?
Interesting.
And slowly I started changing subtle behaviors on a daily basis that opened up space to perceive things differently, if that makes sense, right? Because behaviors form identity, right? So when we can change the identity, the mind has to change. Right?
So what kind of behaviors are these?
Things like, putting a bit of self-love in, waking up and, I used to wake up and smoke a joint. So I was like, how about not doing that? How about waking up and drinking a glass of water and having breakfast, then maybe smoke a joint? Right?
Yeah. Right? Still waking back.
Yeah, but just push it back a bit. And, that behavior led to me eventually stop smoking weed, right? Which was, at that time, it's been a detriment. We can get into a whole episode about drugs, because weed's been amazing, but it's also there's times in my life when it hasn't been amazing, right?
Bruce and Eddie do not advocate for taking drugs.
Yeah.
The government we'll get into that.
But yeah, the behavior, how eating is a behavior, right? So I changed how I ate, my movement behavior, right? I started to work on that. What time I went to bed, things I did in my day, I started saying no more, right? Yeah. That was a big one. Do you want to come to the pub? No,
it doesn't serve me. Thank you very much.
Doesn't serve me. Yeah. I'm okay. I'm going to stay at home and read a book. So I started with subtle behavior changes that led into mindset changes. But everyone has different entry points. Some people connect in different ways. But I find it was easier to change the behaviors first that led to the change in the mindset, or gave me the encouragement and the validation I needed to change the mindset.
It's interesting, because since you're talking about this, I don't know whether being selfish is a mindset. I mean, I think it might be, or being self-absorbed. I think there's probably lots of different mindsets, victim mindset, that, is it's the ego that's, at the center of it. I think as you were talking about, changing behaviors, can influence mindset. I was like, yeah. Like, I think doing things for, other people and trying to be less selfish has really helped me move my mindset away from me, more into love and compassion and being more freely giving, my energy rather than taking. I don't know whether that's like, necessarily a mindset thing, but I think a lot of people, when they need to understand that the mindset is really, it's kind of the ego, at work. It can often kind of be the ego that kind of grips people in this state of mindset. So that's why looking at it and learning about it, and then you can sort of start to defeat it, because, you kind of should be wanting to defeat your ego in the sense of this, this sense of me and I, and because otherwise you're just not as fun to be around. You're just going to end up becoming quite self-absorbed. I think so. I think a lot of it was really interesting the way you were talking about that, because again, like in the 12 steps, they just say go and do service for other people.
Yeah, service is a big part.
And I'd be like, well, what's that going to do? How's making tea for people when they come to meetings? And they were like, just do it.
Yeah.
And I'd start to do it, and I'd be like, why does this feel so good? Like just making tea for people. And then I was like, because I'm helping people, and I'm helping this thing of like people like trying to get better. And like, that's the opposite of what I'm used to, which is like make sales, which was my job, and grab money and like fuck dick over the competition. And it was very, very full of ego. So yeah, so we touched on like victim mindset there. Like, how big is that for you?
It was huge for me.
Right. Yeah.
Now, not so much. Or, these sort of archetype mindsets, they're all necessary, and they all come in your life, and no one's perfect. And I still have the victim come in every now and then, but I fucking know him.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, oh, you're here. Oh, victim. Oh, okay. And I feel through that for a bit, and feel sorry for myself for a bit. Then I'm like, right, fuck off. Get this guy out. Let's change. Let's see what we can do about this now. So I could either be stuck being the victim, and I might be stuck there for a day, might be stuck there for 5 minutes, might be a week. It depends on the level of awareness and the energy I have to action away from it. But the difference now is when he comes in, I notice him. Same as when the boy comes in, the little boy. He shows up a lot. He's the one who's most reactive. If I'm reacting, I know that I'm in the boy. I'm being that 8-year-old Eddie. And then again, I go, okay, I make peace with that. I realise that, and then I bring it back to the adult. Bring it back to me. So what can I do about this problem, or this perceived problem? And I think that's where the power is. It's noticing the archetypes, noticing who's trying to rule the roost, and can I bring it back to the logical adult, not the emotional child, not the emotional victim, and then do something to action it. And as I said, sometimes it's fucking hard. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes it takes me weeks, months. Sometimes that can be done in minutes. It just depends on where I am. But the only thing that's changed is the awareness. These guys still pop into my head. They still try and rule the roost. Yeah. They still creep in, but they don't hang around for as long as they used to.
Yeah.
I was ruled by the boy and the victim for years. I bounced between, very rarely was I the adult. I was bouncing between victim and boy. Victim, why is this happening to me? Why has this situation happened? Instead of changing the tone and being curious to, why is this happening? What is this trying to teach me? What can I learn from this so this doesn't happen again and propel me forward? But that took years and years of the same things repeating. Yeah, eventually I went, hold on a minute. What's actually going on here? What's this trying to show me? Yeah,
I think that's why things like therapy are really good. I quit smoking through NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and with I guess she was like a hypnotherapist, but it's NLP, and we looked at the part of me and we gave that person an identity that was smoking. And it was like, why is that? And it was like, what's that person doing that for? And we identified the reasons. And then we were like, well, how can we bring this person back in line? Yeah. Like looking at like me and these different parts of me is like the crew, right? Yeah. On the good ship Bruce. But this guy is kind of like, he's not helping the direction of the ship moving. Yeah. He's up to no good, whatever, And that was really good. And I think with victim mindset, or any kind of mindset which is potentially harmful, I think it can become like self-fulfilling, where if someone draws attention to it, you have a victim mindset, then the victim's really going to respond to that and come out. Whereas if you can kind of look at it as it's just a part of you and it's not an attack on you, then you can deal with that part of you to help be more of a better person. Like you say, not have this thing rule the roost and govern how you think and all these. I really liked what you said about take the lesson. What's the lesson here? I think a lot of people, when something happens which they're not happy with, a little event which is like, that isn't seen as progress, whatever it might be, they don't get all their workouts in, or like they don't get that promotion, or they really get defeated by it, and because it's a loss. But the thing is that I think within any loss, there's always like a lesson that that can be learned. And I think that's where like reframing, can really help. And therapy and these like NLPs can help to just identify your makeup. But I think also just looking at like, how am I responding in my thought patterns to this event? Because your thoughts then are going to really drive your behaviors. So I think that's where having someone like a coach or a therapist is really helpful. I had a client quite recently who was really down on themselves and felt they had very little to be proud of. And I was looking at them, what they were achieving in the gym, and I was seeing a very different thing. I was like,
right?
Yeah, but it's it's just incredible how down we can be on ourselves. And so I think, reframing is a really powerful tool so if something has happened and you are really struggling with it, sitting down and writing what maybe you're learning through that process, and then that's a positive, any lesson.
And it gives you fuel for the fire, to keep to keep going. It's like, okay, I can implement this now. And, I think coming back into like stories and narratives. So if you want to go a step back further from behaviors, you go into stories and narratives. And a lot of the stories and narratives we hold aren't even our own. They're stories that have been put on us by generally our caregivers, whether it's parents or older siblings or school. One narrative I had was that I wasn't good enough because I constantly got told that by teachers at school. I was constantly told I was stupid, constantly told I was a time waster, I'm not going to be anything. This is in the 90s where school was a lot more harsh than it was now. Some of the things teachers would say to me were disgusting. So as I got into my adolescence, I was holding on to these stories that I wasn't an achiever. I was a bad boy. I was naughty. And one day I woke up and went, actually, this isn't my fucking story.
Yeah.
And started to release those stories, release those narratives, and start to change the story and rewrite it. And you do that through perception.
Yeah.
I spoke recently about a men's circle. Recently, it feels like so much of my life has been falling away, right? Which has been quite hard to deal with. There's lots of shifts happening in my world. Recently had my third baby. We're about to move house. All the business developments, all these things were coming to a heat. And the language I was using, the story I was using was everything is falling away. And then it clicked that if I change the language to everything is coming together, suddenly I feel different about this. So the problem hasn't changed. The exact same thing is happening, but I'm responding to it differently through the language that I'm using, the story, the narrative I'm saying.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Things are no longer falling away. Everything's coming together.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And that changed how I felt. Now my felt experience in my body that gave me positivity in my mind.
Yeah. I want to also just touch on what you brought up there in terms of there's this really nice continuum which I've learnt about, which when I take clients on a journey in terms of into their, often it's like re-kickstarting or even just kickstarting a fitness routine they've never had. And at the start, they don't really have much like in the way of self-belief. Like you would with anything, it's new, I'm not good at this, and you're not good at it. You can't be good at something like right from the off unless you're like a freak. So, and the continuum goes, I'm consciously incompetent. Then you start to move into becoming like competent. But at first you're unconsciously competent. So you don't realize you're actually good at this thing. Like this girl that I just alluded to who wasn't, was going through some issues, but I was like, you should be really, from my point of view, I'm really proud of you and what you're doing. And then you finally move to like being consciously competent at this thing. I think this is where, helping people with their mindset is so important, because at this beginning period, they really need support and help. And they really need to prove to themselves being shown. Look at the results that you're achieving. Yeah. Look at what you're actually doing. And with strength training, with fitness, people, they don't feel good at what they're doing. And so therefore it's really hard to turn up and do that thing, because nobody likes doing something that they don't feel good at. But I think through some of the tools that I help clients with and that I picked up and learned along the way, getting to that place, the promised land is where you just feel, really consciously competent in what you're doing, and then you kind of it's fulfilling and you kind of love it and it's part of your life, and I think that's almost self-discovery. And I think mindset, you can discover lots about yourself, and moving out of this trap of just being really, it's almost like being paralyzed by fear and having any mindset like victim or scarcity. You can really end up like being totally paralyzed by that.
100%.
And you'll just be stuck, and you just end up sort of drifting through, this sort of like abyss of, of your own creating. You mentioned self-sabotage. I think I heard a podcast, really interesting podcast, with a sort of psychologist who works in the fitness space, and her perspective was that self-sabotage, there isn't really in the psychology world such a thing, but obviously it's something we all understand what self-sabotage is. But she was saying from a psychological point of view, we have this fear of like failure or not succeeding. And so we might bring about self-sabotage to almost kind of then to have something to blame. Well, I knew I wouldn't be able to achieve that. Yeah. Look, see, I haven't achieved that because...
It's to validate it, right?
Yeah, it's to validate it. Yeah. And I found that really, really fascinating. And I've seen that show up in my own training, following, quite a hardcore sort of program where I'm getting ready for a photo shoot. Then I get to points where I'm like, I'm just not sure if I want to do this because actually it's just not conducive to like the way
find
I want to live
all
my
the
life.
Reasons, right? Yeah.
And then I've talked to my coach about it, and then and then I've seen it, and then I'm like, oh, no, I've just seen it, what I'm doing. But I'd much rather see it and then maybe do something about it than not. So it's a fascinating thing, mindset. And I think it's something that really evolves and changes. I think also you can bring yourself into a different mindset. You mentioned it just now, about how you can kind of like shift your mindset.
You've got to be, the fundamental thing is you've got to be open to change. And what I find, I've worked with hundreds of people over the years, that a lot of people just aren't open to change. They're not happy with how they are, but they don't want to change anything. So it's like, well, I can't really help you, right?
Yeah.
Because I've said so many times, nothing changes if nothing changes, right? So if you are unhappy in your mind, you need to do something different. It doesn't mean you need to throw everything out and try all these new things. It means just changing, just oscillating one thing, changing one thing at a time, and having a compound effect of like bringing in a new habit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And start with that, and notice the compounding effect that has with how you feel and think about yourself. Yeah. Right. So I call it inputting positive information. So do as many touch points throughout the day where you're inputting something positive, whether that's getting up when your fucking alarm goes off, snoozing 10 times, negative feedback loop straight away.
Yeah,
right.
So you helped me with this a lot about, this is to do with growing self-belief.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Well, you find the doable. Everyone's going to have a different base, right? But what a lot of people are trying to do, they're trying to do the impossible from a place where they haven't got much strength and courage in themselves. So they're trying to change too much. What is the doable? So, I worked with one client that we found the doable for her was to drink a glass of water in the morning. Because what she did, she always woke up and drank coffee, right? Mm-hmm. And that is a negative feedback loop. I wake up, I'm not good enough, I have got no energy, I'm gonna drink coffee, and this is gonna be the thing that gets me going. So I said, okay, let's drink water. And a week into it, she was struggling. She wasn't managing to drink her water. So I was like, okay, how can we make this more doable? You're gonna pour that glass of water the night before, and you're gonna have it on your bedside table. So when you wake up, the water's there. So we made it very achievable for her. And then about 2 weeks in, I got a message. She's like, fucking, I'm drinking, I've achieved it. I'm drinking that water every morning. But what that has, it's not about the water. It's about that waking up and putting a piece of positive information inwards towards yourself that you're fucking worth it and that you can do it. And what that had an ongoing effect throughout her day. Suddenly she found that come tea time, she wasn't picking up the biscuit or the donut. Come lunchtime, she was stepping out the office and going and eat her lunch in the park instead of sitting in the office and gossiping and eating shit. And it all stemmed from this glass of water. It has this knock-on effect. And then you start to add more touch points throughout your day. You stop and you read a book for 10 minutes, or you walk home, or you do that workout, or you eat that meal, whatever it is. But this is when I work with clients, I find the fucking doable. Everyone's got a doable. Then you do that really fucking well. Then you start to look at, okay, what's a little bit more?
Yeah, it's the extra.
Yeah, how can we push this a bit? Now that you built up the belief that you do what you say you're gonna do, right? Because most of us, the body doesn't trust the mind. right? Because we're constantly saying we're going to do shit and we're not going to do it. Oh, I'm not going to drink tonight. You get smashed. I'm going to go gym 5 days a week. You go once. I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. You don't. So you're constantly creating this negative feedback.
Yeah, so this is like really interesting. And I try and help clients with this because it's something you taught me. And I think like, I try to make it relatable to people in terms of like, we've all been, hopefully everybody listening to this will relate to, like, you're sat on the sofa and you're like, I've said I'm going to go to the gym. So I'm going to go to the gym now. And then just your body just doesn't take you there. And then before you know it, you've found something else to do. You've made yourself another cup of tea. And then you're, actually, if I go now, then I'll be late so I'm not going to go. And it's just that inability to actually just like move, just like actually just like go. And the more that happens, the body then like just the more resistance there is to actually going. We've all been there. You come back from a holiday. How easy is it to go back to the gym? Not very. No. How easy is it to go to the gym when you're going 3 times a week for 5 years? Fucking easy. Yeah. It's just like routine. So I think that I wrote down like habits, like pathways, and then like and then I think the reason why change is so difficult for a lot of people, because it is difficult and does require work, is because the status quo, doing things as we've always done it, is really safe. It's really safe. There's no consequences. We know exactly what's going to happen, even if it's just like not a lot. It's just the same shit as always. Right? But that is safe. So but new habits do create these new little pathways in our brains, this like trust, this like self-belief, this confidence. And then they also obviously change, if we're talking about exercise, our physical and our health markers. So it's such a powerful thing, mindset, isn't it? But I also really like what you said about, it's just process, and you just have to be open to it and lean into change and trying new things. But I think once you start to be interested in it and observe yourself and then create these changes, I think maybe it becomes an easier practice to do.
It creates momentum. So momentum is something that's kind of lost. We don't really hear about it. We hear about motivation, which is bullshit because that's not always going to be there. But we need to create momentum, and you start creating momentum by doing these very small incremental changes, and suddenly that rock starts to roll and you don't have to push it as much, and it's creating changes in the right areas of your life. And sometimes it takes someone else to come in to help you identify that. I think a lot of people are trying to change the wrong things and then failing at it and then giving up. Because we live in the world of the extravagant, the extraordinary. And to be honest, a bit like weight loss, it's really fucking boring and it's really fucking simple. You just got to take those small, simple steps. Yeah. There isn't a magic pill. There's not this big thing you have to do. It's literally like getting up and drinking that water or going for the water or doing these very small things that eventually will compound into helping you do bigger things. But everyone wants to jump and do the big thing first, and no one wants to put in the work with the small steps. Yeah. I think once you get over that and realize that, okay, this is a process, it's not going to happen overnight. For myself, it took years of constantly coming back to this. And now I've got enough momentum and enough tools on my tool belt that I can keep that momentum going. And if it gets stuck, I've got the tools to get things moving again. But it's taken years. Literal years, because I had 27 odd years of absolute debauchery. So I'm not gonna change that overnight. It's gonna take roughly the same amount of time to
you've had unique things happen to you, in your upbringing that affected, and I think also, people might be listening to this who have, certain mental health conditions, depression, bipolar, or whatever it is, like I don't know, can you say like ADD? I mean, I wouldn't necessarily. I've got ADD, but there are obviously people are then more prone to sort of other things, anxiety and depression and things. So but I think what like those things, we acknowledge and we recognise, but I think you can still have, your mindset can still, I think, help you cope with those things. Do you look at those things as just like inflictions, things that are just dragging you down, or can you look at those things as actually things that make you quite unique, make you quite different?
Well, they're tools to understanding yourself. Yeah. So you can either be a victim, so you can either learn that you got ADD and be a victim of that, or you can be like, so that's why I do this, this, and this, and maybe if I change this, this, and this, it'll be more conducive for my life. Yeah. So again, it's not the thing, it's the perspective. Yeah. So the same thing can happen to two people, and it can be a positive experience for one and a negative for the other, just due to their perception. And again, if you're talking about mental health conditions and illnesses and all of these different things, they all hold stories around them. And it's the story you choose to subscribe to is going to affect your mindset. So I'll give one example is when my mum had cancer and it was actually terminal. She's beaten this, and it's crazy. The doctor said she was a miracle, and she said, "How dare you? Because anyone can do this." Because she had a mindset, and one thing she used to say is, "I'm living with cancer." She would never say, "I'm dying of cancer." Just that language, right? Again, this is why language is so important. That perspective, that language, the story she subscribed to was a positive story, not a negative story. And I believe it was her mindset that led her to, amongst some other things as well, led her to beat that cancer.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's fascinating. I think we're only just starting to realise like the power of the mind and how it influences so much. And I think, I just want to say having ADD makes me a superhero. That's my perspective
100%.
on it. I think that's maybe like a good place to end it on is, I think, not me being a superhero, but this idea of evolution. Really, I think ADD, I'm starting to realize, is kind of like something that increasing numbers of us have, and so I think it could just be part of our evolution. And I think mindset is something that will evolve in you, but you have to work at it and take action around it, get help, get support from people who can help you with that, and not letting it hold you back. I think if you feel like your mindset is holding you back, then look to do something about that. Anyway, we hope that this was useful. We're now going to go and have a jar in the sun. 2 minutes. When are we going to actually do one that's 30 minutes? Maybe the next one.
We'll try.
Stay tuned for that one. Big love, everyone.
Big love, guys.
Peace.